Hi again, welcome to another of my Tuesdays video reviews. This is Cecilia from don'tdroolonthewool.blogspot.com, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Mary Frances Knitting and Crocheting book. I found this book at one of my local used bookstores. It was $3. I was excited because I'd never seen it before. And when I actually took a peek inside, it's called Mary Frances Knitting and Crocheting Book, or Adventures Among the Knitting People by Jane Fryer. I read the preface here, and it says, I'm just going to read this out loud. Dear girls, after reading about Mary Frances's many adventures among the kitchen people, and the thimble people, and the garden people, and with the doll family and the brave family in the Mary Frances books, perhaps you thought that no girl, not even Mary Frances, could find any more funny little fairy helpers right in her own house. But Mary Frances did, for the knitting people had overheard many of the lessons which the thimble people gave her, and they were almost jealous. At least, they probably would have been jealous if they had not planned to surprise Mary Frances with some delightful lessons in crocheting and knitting. Such good lessons that before she knew it, Mary Frances had made the loveliest caps and sweaters and booties for her dolls. Just exactly the kinds you want for your own dolls. And now you can have them if you wish, for Mary Frances says that the knitting people told her that they are always just as ready to help any other girl who wants their help, if she will follow the lessons exactly as they are given in this book. And it goes on, and once I read that, I was like, when was this book written? And it was originally published in 1918. So I thought it would be an interesting piece of knitting history, so I purchased it. And immediately I was interested in the format, the way that it's written, the way that it's laid out, because first of all, you can see there's little pictures. There's one there, out popped crochet. You see how they spell crochet in this little bag, and there's just a million little pictures in here because it's a story. It's not just first you make a slip knot and then you cast on. There's a whole little story going on here about this girl, Mary Frances, who lives in whatever, the late 1900s or late, yeah, and she lives with her parents and her aunt is going to teach her how to knit, but she's afraid because she thinks she's going to suck at it. And then luckily these magical creature things pop up and they teach her each day before her lessons with her aunt so that she looks like she's already superior. So it was really cute. I really liked it. Here's some of the characters. Woolly Ball, there's Crochet, Yarn Baby is up here, and then there's Knit and Knack, which are the knitting needles. And it's so interesting to read because here it's Woolly Ball is talking about all the different yarns there are. And Germantown Zephyr, or Germantown wool, a soft woolly yarn, very much used where warmth is needed. Saxony wool, woolen knitting floss, Teasel wool, Angora wool, knitting worsted. The chart that we know of is not in here. The chart of superfine, fine, fingering, worsted, DK, bulky, super bulky. There's not a word of that. And it's really cute because of the way it's written as a story, the way they teach it is just kind of, got a little sticky note here. Okay, here the Yarn Baby interrupted. If you will bring your chest of yarns, little miss, she said, we will soon see if you have all those different kinds of yarns. Mary Frances went to the closet and brought the chest to the sewing table. As she pulled out the bright-colored yarns, some small white balls fell onto the table. Oh, goody! Exclaimed Woolly Ball. I see that you are not going to let moths eat up your treasures. Moths hate camphor and mothballs. I just love them. So it's like a cute, they inject the lessons into the story. And then when the actual knitting and crochet lessons commence, there are black and white photographs, which are pretty thorough. I did notice while I was reading it, I read through the whole book already, I did notice that sometimes the picture doesn't match up with what it's supposed to be. And this one, it says how to cast on knitting stitches with the fingers. And it's a picture of casting on with a crochet hook. And then on the next page, it says how to cast on with a crochet hook, and it's the same picture. So it's like they just duplicated that picture, but it's old, so I don't know. I still think it's cute. So it said it boasts over 55 projects, and at the beginning, when you're just learning, there's sort of a, let's find the templates, all these doll clothes. So each of these little outfits you can make, and they each sort of progress in difficulty. You can see there's scarves and things first, leading up to this, you've got a little aviator outfit, and that's one of the easiest. The necklace there is just a simple crochet chain. So it builds up from the crochet chain to the scarf, to the shawls, to a hat, to sweaters, and that's in the crochet lesson. And then it goes on about halfway through the book. It starts with the knitting lessons, and you make a shawl and a hood and so on, while learning how to knit, purl. Nothing about short rows or yarn overs or anything, but it's still really interesting. And I thought this was awesome. I will give you a gauge card to measure the sizes of crochet hooks and knitting needles, finished crochet. So here's the gauge card. I hope you can see that. It looks pretty normal, considering this one's mine. That's sort of standard now. This big hole is a US 15. This is actually the crochet one. This one down here is the knitting. It says this scale for steel knitting needles only. The thickest is an 8. The smallest is a 20. It says steel knitting needles are usually numbered from 8 to 20. Size 8 is large. Size 20 is very fine. So that's the exact opposite of how it is now, which is really interesting, because then when you get to the back, where there's all these patterns, it tells you what needle to use, and you're like, I don't really know what needle to use. And it'll say, it doesn't give you a gauge, it just gives you the directions. It tells you the material. It says 3-fold Saxony wool, silk for trimming, bone crochet hook number 2. So it doesn't really give you a gauge, and you don't know what 3-fold Saxony wool is anymore, because it's not 1918 anymore. So patterns are kind of useless to me. I'm sure if you go through someone who's like skilled with translating vintage patterns, they can knit these things, but honestly I didn't buy this for the project since they're doll clothes mostly, and I just thought it was so adorable I had to buy it. Okay, here's another thing that I laughed at. Fairly Flew flies. So after she meets Woolly Ball and Yarn Baby and Crochet and Knit and Knack, they introduce her to Fairly Flew, who's a fairy. And so the fairy comes in and talks to her, and she says, "My name is Fairly Flew. I love to help people who are trying to learn. I am the teacher of the crocheting and knitting people. If I lend you one of my magic needles, your work will go so fast that you will say that the needle fairly flew. That is how I became to be called Fairly Flew." So no sooner did Mary Frances start to make a row of stitches than the magic crochet needle darted ahead of her fingers, and she finished the row in the twinkle of an eye. In about 60 twinkles, the little shawl was finished. I just thought it was cute because they don't have magic needles, and poor kids that are reading this are probably like, I wish Fairly Flew would come and help me. But yeah, so then at the end of the book, after she finishes all her lessons, she gets a magic paper from the fairies, and they give her the magic paper, and tell her that she should group up with other girls and teach them how to knit and pass on the skills, and so that they could make many, many useful garments for people who needed them. So she goes on and passes it on. So I thought it was cute that it ended like that. And then it says, Mary Frances told me this whole story herself and asked me to write this book so that you who read it may have some such pleasure as she had in learning to crochet and knit. So like the whole premise I think is really adorable. And then so the magic paper is at the end, the last chapter. The magic paper. And the magic paper is basically instructions for all kinds of other garments, mostly for dolls. There's a lot of doll clothing, a lot of it's crochet. The majority of this book is about crochet, which I don't crochet, so kind of useless for me, but still really adorable. And then there are 2 sweaters in the back here that are for full-grown people. There's a child-sized and a lady's sweater. And again, it's really weird to read the instructions. They say things like knit 5 ribs even, and so by a rib they mean 2 rows of garter stitch. So it's just different, and it's not, you know, spaced the same way as modern patterns are. It's all bunched together in one area. But then at the end, my favorite part of this book, the only part I'm probably going to actually use, is chapter 39, Red Cross Knitting. And this is actually, this circular is prepared primarily for the use of hand knitters. So the color of the yarn has been carefully considered with the authorities of the War Department and with the American Red Cross Commissioner for Europe in Paris. So this is the actual pamphlet that had been passed around during the war for the knitters who were, you know, purling harder. I mean, it wasn't Pearl Harbor, but they were purling harder because they knit with every war effort. But yeah, so it has the Red Cross needles 1, 2, 3, and the sizes, I'd call those maybe 6, 7, 8 or so. And there's a ton of little, let's see, a muffler, a washcloth, a sleeveless sweater, a knitted helmet, wristlets, medium-sized sock, bed sock, and a hot water bottle cover. So these are like old patterns that were actually used during the war, and my boyfriend wants one of these. One of the gay little helmet things. He's all, I want a genuine World War artifact knitted by you, oh my god. So yeah, it's a cool book. I'm a big fan of it. I think it's adorable. It says, easy enough for the novice, but also appealing to the experienced enthusiast. I did actually work on one of these projects before I did this video so that I could say that I did it. Which one did I do? Where did it go? I worked on the I tried to work on the doll's knitted sports sweater, but once I read through the pattern, I was like, I don't really understand this, because it says you need 2 bone knitting needles number 3, 2 steel knitting needles number 10, and it has you switch the needles, but I didn't know which needles were which, and I should have just gone on with it, but the construction was really odd and I ripped it. But I didn't want to do anything boring like the shawl because I wanted to learn something, so maybe I'll crochet something from it one day. I'm definitely keeping this one around because it's just a little piece of history, and it's just an adorable story, you know? Like I said, it's got all those little pictures in it, and so it feels, I'm glad I own it. I'm definitely going to share it with some other knitters, and I'm telling you all now, it's a great book if you want to read it. Thank you for watching, and you can find me on Ravelry as grandmastatus, and that's all. Bye.